Earth Mother, please send me.
Shalom, shalom, and welcome to another episode of Wilderness Torah's Shmita Slowdown series. Really thank you for joining us. In this series, we explore the power of Shmita through live conversations with change makers from across the world. Shmita means release in Hebrew. This is the 7th year of a 7-year cycle when we, the Jewish people, are instructed to release Shmita, to release land from control, to release debt, and to release those in servitude. It's a powerful cultural admonishment to create what we're discovering is ecological, societal, and economic balance in the world. Today, we have a profound cultural opportunity to interpret and apply Shmita to our lives in a time when it seems like we need it more than ever. At Wilderness Torah, we're using Shmita this year to take stock, to clarify our purpose through strategic planning, to develop and plan for the new 7 years with the launching of our new Center for Earth-Based Judaism. And we're excited that we're doing this Shmita Slowdown series as a way to share diverse voices and to explore myriad ways to think about Shmita in our lives. So my name's Rabbi Zelig Golden. I'm one of the founders and current executive director of Wilderness Torah, and I'm stoked to invite and to welcome a dear friend, Devorah Brous. Devorah is an urban homesteader, a community organizer, and in my opinion, one of the most profound teachers I've met, working with soil to soil, as a frontline organizer, doing healing justice work and land rights work. And Devorah is working in justice movements and environmental justice movements in various ways. I'm always in deep respect of the way you organize, connect, and uplift diverse communities. I met Devorah a long time ago, probably 2006 perhaps, when Devorah was the director of Bustan, an organization that she founded to uplift Bedouin leadership and the unrecognized village of Azazne and other Bedouin tribes in the land of Israel, people that were deeply oppressed. And Bustan was a powerful project uplifting and supporting these people. And so I know, Devorah, that you are going to have a profound approach to how we can interpret ancient sacred law and uplift it for a sacred time, how we do that to support the ecology, society, and economy, and how we uplift justice at this time. So welcome, my dear old friend.
Thank you very much for having me, Zell.
Yeah.
Great to be here.
So let's open this up. I have a few questions, and I'm just excited to hear, where you want to take this. But just to start, like, what does Shmita mean to you?
Well, I think it all boils down to a practice of moving away from control and that need to steer and drive and conquer and own and possess, and instead to kind of dig within and unearth a whole other set of strategies that are led by humility, that are like rooted in reciprocity, in giving back.
That's awesome. So Shmita is an admonishment to release control, and it doesn't necessarily prescribe the types of approaches to how we do that. What replaces the mechanisms of control? So I feel like this, in a way, is the charge we have in a time when the economy is very uncertain and certainly is not equitable, in a time when the social fabrics here in the United States, where you and I both live and across the world, are tearing. COVID is just one of the many factors. And when we're facing the biggest ecological challenges of our time, climate change and other types of issues, but certainly climate change being the most predominant, in my opinion. Shmita is pointing you towards a release control. What types of strategies do you see as the most important strategies to think about in the face of this opportunity that Shmita presents?
Yeah. Look, I think that there is not just one prescription of how to experience like the vast radical Torah of Shmita, but more that each one of us knows those areas within which we are the most inclined to want to control, and working to release and unfurl or kind of let go and relinquish control is going to look different for each one of us. And so I think that so much of this is about like working through our lineage and understanding, like at one time, the concept of samud, of clinging and cleaving to the land, was so valuable that it made sense that we were struggling and warring to try to actually own the land, even though in the Torah we're not permitted to own land. Today, 93% of all the land in Israel is not owned, and only 7% of it is owned. The Israel Lands Administration has the control, and that in some ways like offers a framework for us, if it seems and feels really challenging, to think about working towards meeting the calls for recognizing the land rights of Indigenous peoples, for example, whether that's in Israel, the Bedouin folk, or the Palestinian people, or whether that is in your own community, where I live on the unceded traditional territories of the Tongva people. It can be very threatening for people, the conversations that we're having in this Shmita year about reparations and giving the land back. It's really, it's bringing up a lot of that inner turmoil of like, but if we let go, if we rematriate, like what is ours, how will we pass something on of value to our children and our grandchildren? And so those conversations become really, really potent ways for us to explore the power of the Shmita in order to kind of almost get ready for the Yovel. Like these are practice runs for where we're going.
Totally. The Yovel, of course, is the ultimate Shmita. It's the 50th year, the Jubilee. It's after 7 cycles of 7 years and doing Shmita 7 times during that 49-year cycle. We hit the 50th year, and it's the shofar blows, and it's the great release. And so I'm curious, in relationship to Shmita, this pathway to Yovel, I want to track this Indigenous solidarity piece that you're bringing up for a moment. Wilderness Torah just launched a design charrette process to develop the Center for Earth-Based Judaism in partnership with Camp Newman. Camp Newman is one of 15 URJ camps wholly owned by the Union of Reformed Judaism. So this is land in Sonoma County owned by the Reform Movement, which is primarily based in New York. And then they have, a California staff running this amazing summer camp. And then Wilderness Torah and Camp Newman are now developing this relationship. We are going to come in and support the stewardship of and the development of a Center for Earth-Based Judaism, a part of their land. They have 500 acres, inside the land, where we'll develop permaculture gardens and spaces for learning and ceremony, and we'll see where it goes. This is on the land of the Onatsatis, also known in the Spanish vernacular, the Wapo, but they prefer the name Onatsatis, as well as Southern Pomok and the Coast Miwok people. So, ancient lands stewarded by Indigenous peoples who are doing the work of reviving their cultures, and there's a culture conservancy here in Sonoma County that's amazing, trying to revive how they relate to lands. We are really interested in moving towards Indigenous solidarity. How do you see, Devorah, the Shmita and the principle that we're talking about? How does that incline us towards Indigenous solidarity? How does this move us in that direction?
It's such an exquisite opportunity to actually understand what real relationship is like, because up until now, our relationships with land are transactional, and it's all about paperwork and ownership, and particularly here in LA, it's all about real estate. And so you actually, as a community, have this opportunity to be able to support and uplift Indigenous-led movements in your area, and to kind of pioneer what it looks like to be in relationship with the communities. And so I think that it's super crucial to look at long-term strategies around, like, what will the land look like in 49 years? Where are you going in terms of not only like maybe having these land acknowledgements, which in some cases can end up being a little bit perfunctory, like we check that box, but what are we doing to actually be in deep and profound relationships with Indigenous leaders from the area, to bring in and uplift their voices, not just to like open a ceremony and again check that box, but to be centrally involved with some of the decision making about how the land is going to be tended and stewarded over the years, to bring the leadership of the Indigenous communities also into the teaching roles, not just the ceremonial roles, but the teaching roles, the leadership of what this communal vision of an earth-based land relationship can look like again.
Yeah, I'm really just hearing you say repeatedly, and I'm catching this message that Shmita points us towards real-time relationship. There's a way in which that transactional kind of capitalist, egocentric real estate ownership paradigm is affronted by Shmita, and that it's actually saying, wow, you actually have to release your control, which then forces you back into having real relationships.
That's right.
With real people.
That's right. So and that requires like really looking at the hard stuff. And so I think like Shmita on one level is what happens on the communal level when Jewish landowners, as well as like the Catholic Church that owns vast tracts of land in this country, as well as private individuals. There's one named John Malone who owns over 2,220,000 acres of land, one person. And so if we're thinking about the radical land reform that is called forth in our teachings of Shmita, what does that look like? Could we be in conversation with significant landowners in the Jewish community and have conversations about what release looks like to not just cleave to land, but cleave to the teachings that land doesn't belong to me or you or the Jewish community or the Catholic community. And in some ways, it has to be restored to that primal relationship that it doesn't belong to anyone.
Nice.
That sacred like call, that clarion call to come back to the original, stewardship, not to make money off of the land, but to build relationships and steward the land, with integrity.
I've heard this quote, at least at once attributed to Chief Joseph of, and then I also have seen it attributed to other places. So, seems like it might be universal teaching, and I'm hearing it coming through you here, which is like, we do not own the land, but the land owns us. And in a way, the Shmita and the admonishments from the Torah around Shmita is that teaching, isn't it?
Yeah. For me, one of the most painful experiences of this Shmita year is seeing that while so many of us are really taking it seriously to dream audaciously right now about what it could be, it's not actually being practiced by so many people in the land of Israel. Like, it's on us to see this as an exercise, and it's a voluntary exercise that has proven very fertile for extraordinary, outpourings of ways in which we could be really practicing a release and understanding primary teachings of regeneration. But for me, when things like when the Jewish National Fund is uprooting Bedouin encampments in order to plant trees right now. Just a few weeks ago, 155 Bedouin were arrested, and 16 of them were indicted, because the Jewish National Fund during a Shemitah year is planting trees. Right. And so it's painful for me that there's such a disconnect between what we have to do and what we are aspiring toward.
So let me ask you, the raising of the issues connected to Israel is interesting for many reasons. And one of it is that because the Shemitah has multiple aspects to it. There's the ecological aspect of releasing land. There's the economic aspect of releasing debt, and there's the social aspect of releasing people from servitude who have come into servitude, however that has occurred. And it's interesting because the ecological aspect of Shemitah, the release of the land during the 7th year, only applies within the borders of Israel, halachically, according to Jewish law. The economic aspect and the social aspects apply to Jews wherever they are. Now, I'm hearing you, and I feel the same way, that even though the halakha of Shemitah applies only to the land of Israel, it is not being practiced, and it seems like it never was fully practiced in the land of Israel, or frankly, anywhere for that matter. So Shemitah seems like it's this central, aspirational, forward-thinking teaching that perhaps for the first time in Jewish history, a certain segment of the Jewish population, those of us who are dreaming about Shemitah, are taking it seriously because we're confronting things they've never confronted. So I want to raise this up, and say, how do we take Shemitah, which is halakha, which is Jewish law, and say, okay, we're going to repurpose this, reinterpret this, embody it in a new way with the spirit of Shemitah. And how do you, for those listening, Devorah, to your powerful voice, how do you recommend individuals take on Shemitah, wherever we are?
Yeah, I love just riffing with you about all of this because I think for me, this is what makes Judaism real. It's it takes it out of the walls of the synagogue and out of the text that can be very dense for many of us, and it takes it into our dynamics, into our connections. And a lot of my work this year has been about how do you take the Shemitah consciousness and actually wear it, eat it? How do you eat your medicine? And how do you, when you're foraging for only what you can carry, how do you find ways to share everything else, and think about equity, and not just think about it, but actually bring it forth, take your fences down, right? So this whole year, my land is fallow, and this whole year, the practices that kind of resonate the most for me are thinking about personal debts that I've incurred and how to release those, and then stepping into the questions about food sovereignty and thinking about the plants that grow perennially without needing all of the inputs and all the intense labor that comes with tending the earth. How do we work with perennial plants in our diets this year? How do we cleanse the need for those comfort foods? How do we create more spaciousness in our relationships so that there's actually a sense of rest? Because I gotta say that in the activist world, so many people come in, give everything we've got, and then burn out. And so in this kind of this call towards thinking about long-term planning, thinking about where we want to be in 2028 and 2029, how do we do this by conserving our own energy reserves and not depleting that as like a finite resource? Like, how do we continue to fuel the movements that we believe in, but without burning ourselves out? And I feel like these questions are all about regeneration. What we learn from witnessing how the land works when you let it lie fallow is going to look different for each one of us. I mean, for me personally, it's one of the most potent exercises that we can possibly work through. And then as individuals, if we can take Sabbath and sabbatical consciousness into it, like our cellular memory, then we can actually go back into our communal institutions and work on creating long-term strategies for sabbatical leave, so that we're actually celebrating and feeding the leaders in our movements and not allowing them to burn out, and putting into practice ideas like composting absolutely, after every harvest holiday this year, like putting back into the earth what we've received from it all of these years, stepping out of that like sort of reflexive relationship that we have of just taking, and finding ways of giving back.
Nice. Giving back. I heard you talk about regeneration, and I've heard sort of three themes that keep on arising, which is this is very personal. This guides us into being relational in ways that maybe we forgot. And this is a principle that is instructing us on some kind of regenerative approach to life, in our personal life, in the way we relate to our land. And I'm feeling it, the personal path of regeneration, and then what the impact has in the collective. So I'd like to ask you, well, I'm gonna ask you a two-part question. I'm gonna let you riff. One is that I heard you briefly link up Shabbat and Shmita, and I'd be interested if you want to make that connection a little clearer. And then the second and last question would be just like, for you, what is the biggest change you'd love to see coming out of the Shmita year, in the world, or in our lives, or, and maybe it's like this October, or maybe it's 49 years from now, but what's the biggest change you want to see that Shmita guides us to? So, Shabbat and Shmita, and the biggest change that we're going to move towards wrapping up. However, I'd love to continue this conversation for the next hour. This is great.
Me too. I thank you so much for this. I think that the magic that we're able to tap into, the medicine of Sabbath each week that we are able to tap into, comes from that understanding that we're working pretty hard those other 6 days of the week. And in fact, we need that medicine to replenish and to rejuvenate, to revitalize our ability to go back out into the world. So Sabbath, like, we get a little taste of just how magical it could be to turn off the phone and like shut down the computer, and all of the thinking that goes with that 6 and 1 rhythm, like turning away from all of that push and pull of the week. And so the Shemitah consciousness, the ancient sabbatical consciousness, by the way, is very different from like the way sabbatical consciousness is practiced in our culture, which is, it's like, you're gonna take a break from your day job so you can go bang out that book. But you need to get back on the hamster wheel. So you're not gonna have that much time to bang out your book. You're not gonna be able to really capture your own imagination and work with that material, if you have to keep all the time, being productive and meeting your achievements and the needs for these metrics that people place on us, or we place on ourselves. So there is that. And I think that sabbatical consciousness is kind of also about that trust, that piece of trust, that knowing that even though it's very tricky to change the way that we are relating to money and community and land and health over the course of an entire year, that there is so much medicine to be unearthed in the exercise of taking this Torah into heart and soul, you know.
Beautiful.
And just to respond to your second question, like what I would really love to see is that it's not just an exercise, that like, you know, more and more people, I mean, there are tens of thousands of people that are just animated by these ideas, and there's conversations happening all over the Jewish world about ideas that were very non-normative, you know, just 7 years ago. So like, I love seeing where we've come from and dreaming about where we're going as a people. And I would love to also imagine into a place wherein it goes from this personal realm that I've been talking about, where we can begin to distinguish between when to extract and when to replenish, when to sow and when to fallow. Like it goes past those personal realms, and it goes into the larger collective series of conversations that extend beyond the Jewish community, such that we're speaking with people that have deep connections with the land, who can also guide us in process of learning about different cultures, ideas around the seventh generation and the seventh and different interpretations of what the Jubilee was like in the Catholic world, like the Roman Catholic Church. And obviously there's some challenges to overcome, but we're not in this exploration on our own, as individuals. So if we're going to get to the point where the lands can be returned to their original owners, and where over 40 million slaves can be released, you know, 1 in 4 of those slaves are children in the world today. If we're going to get to that place where debt can actually be forgiven, where college students don't have to live for the rest of their days feeling like the immense amount of pressure that they will never really be able to repay the debt, then we have to be able to synchronize our capacity to organize around the ancient sabbatical and the Jubilee framework of, you know, of our Torah, and imagine what it looks like to actually work in collaborative ways with other people that are also animated by these teachings.
Amen. Amen. Well, I hear, you know, I hear the personal and the relational and the transformational, and now I hear you speaking about the collective consciousness, and I hear you like talking about Shmita becoming a principle for the global paradigm shift, transcending Judaism, you know, deep roots, deep earth-based roots that have nourished Judaism, that then upon which you might say, you know, Christianity is built upon, you know, and we could discuss what that means and feels, but there's a taproot there that is accessible to the Christian community and, you know, our Muslim brothers and sisters, and begin to expand this into a global conversation, and also see what traditions they bring, and then the traditions of the indigenous peoples that we live on right here on these lands of Turtle Island and across the planet. I mean, it gets very inspiring. And I want to say, wow, thank you. My mind is popping, and I would love to continue the conversation. Unfortunately, this is the time we have for today. But Devorah, I have no doubt that we will continue this conversation with you. So thank you so much. And thank you all those who are taking in Devorah's teachings today. And Devorah, just briefly, where can people follow you and your work?
Oh, people could find me on From Soil to Soul with the number 2, from soil2soul.com. And I would be very excited to continue the conversation with you, Rabbi Zal. Thank you.
Thank you, friend. So that's it for today. We thank you so much. Thank you for joining and learning. To learn more about the Shmita Slowdown work, including the design charrette in this process of developing the Center for Earth-Based Judaism, please go to wildernesstorah.org. And yeah, this has been a powerful year. And really stay tuned for how we continue this conversation, but also how we embody Shmita as an organization, as a community, through strategic thinking, through strategic designing of land, and through culture change work. And you know, later this summer and soon this fall, we're going to be revealing new plans, a new vision for the center, and also how we are reorienting our organization culturally, related to power, related to gender dynamics, related to race, related to equity, Indigenous solidarity. We're deeply churning on how to become a much more regenerative, much more collective-minded nonprofit organization, so that we can embody the change we want to see in the world. So stay tuned, and thank you. And please join us in 2 weeks for another episode in our Shmita Slowdown series, and be well in this beautiful and challenging time.